Hi, welcome to The Sacred Journey. The Sacred Journey is the program that reminds you that life is a wonderful adventure. Each and every experience we have is a unique and perfect opportunity for learning. I'm Joyce St. Germain, and today's co-host is George Herrick, dear friend, and someone you have seen many times on The Sacred Journey. And let's see, I'm going to go by memory here. George, besides being a dear friend, extraordinary human being, a unique and authentic human being, author, artist, poet, shamanic practitioner, master life coach, teacher, workshop facilitator, retreat leader, and on and on and on. And those are just off the top of my head. So we just finished a show about the shadow, and I'll invite you to do a little recap because today's show, let's see if I can get the name right, Creative Expression in Integrating the Shadow. So for people who didn't see or don't remember the last show, talk a little bit about the shadow.
Sure. So, the shadow is a term that Jung came up with in the 20th century to describe all of the parts of ourselves that we repress, that we bury, that we don't want to look at. Whatever we don't know about ourselves is in the shadow. And the way I look at it is it's the stuff that I repress, that I don't want to look at. It's the stuff that I suppress and bury, but it's also the stuff that I oppress within myself, the stuff that I judge about myself. And as you pointed out last time, one of the key ways of noticing what we judge in ourselves is seeing what we judge in other people. Other people are mirrors for us, and we can't really see what isn't a part of us. And so when I see in someone else something that repulses me or repels me, I have to take a look at, okay, where does that fit within me? It's sort of like, this is what I do with my clients. While you're pointing at somebody else, you've got one finger pointing at them, and you've got three fingers pointing back at you. And so, what's the story you're telling yourself? What's the judgment you're having of the other person because you're judging yourself at the same time? And what can you do about it? And once we see how the thumb is locked over that, once we release that, now we have an open hand and we can live our lives more fully. But we have to take a look at what those things are to be able to do that. So,
Demonstration of that.
So the shadow is all the stuff in there. Okay. And once we own it, then what we had held in the shadow, we can now recognize as okay, I can have these aspects of myself rather than these aspects having me, and me having to live a smaller life to protect myself from those things being exposed. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And we also talked about the golden shadow, the parts in us where our talents and gifts that have been repressed or undiscovered have lay hidden or dormant.
Yeah,
So that's what this
exactly.
show is about.
Well, the golden shadow is I'll use a personal example. So as an artist, there are times when I'll come up with some new direction for my art. And then I've got an art show coming up. Well, I'll paint in my old style for the art show and not show the new stuff because I'm afraid of what people might think of it, or because I don't trust my own talents with it yet, or there's some part where I'm afraid to expose it or express it into the world. That's the golden shadow. So I make myself a little bit smaller and I pull back and, put this kind of boundary around me and make everything safe until finally that becomes too uncomfortable and it starts to leak out. Or if it doesn't leak out, if I have the wherewithal, the inner support, then I'll take the leap and show it, and maybe I'll show one piece to start with or whatever. I just did that with a show I had a couple of months ago. I showed one piece in a new style I was working on.
And how was it received?
It was received very well.
Which I would have
So,
imagined.
yeah,
But that's a great example of it, that we can be afraid of how great our talents and gifts are, because then that turns to judgment. Well, that's kind of vain, and who am I that I would? And we talked last show about observing and judging being two different things, because we can judge talents as harshly in gifts as we can judge those less desirable parts of us too. I mean, it's
yeah,
not like
yeah.
all gumdrops and rainbows when we're talking about our talents and our creativity. There are fears that go with those, and there are doubts that go with those.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, another wonderful thing that you pointed out in the last show is our humanness. And we're going to judge certain things as human beings. It's part of what we do. But when we can be conscious of the fact that it is a judgment, then that allows us to move into the territory of observation, because judgment is a way of minimizing, of holding down, holding back, and it doesn't allow for the expansiveness of who we are or who the other person is.
Right. And as artists, and I spent my entire other worldly life as an art teacher, I have said, and I know that we've discussed this before, we need food, we need shelter, we need companionship, we need spiritual nourishment, we need all of these things. I'm sure sleep and all that. I'm sure I've forgotten a few, but we absolutely need a means of creative expression.
Yes. Yeah.
Do we need it to be alive? If we mean being able to breathe in and breathe out and have your heart pumping, sustaining life, we can, but enjoying life fully, no. Can you imagine your life without some means of creative expression?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. There's a huge difference psychologically, emotionally, even physically, a huge difference between survival and thriving. And we can't thrive without creative expression. And that doesn't mean we have to be artists or we have to, creativity is the expression of our essence in an authentic way. And so it's unique to me. I'm creative with my gardening. I'm creative as a painter. I'm creative. I wrote a book. I teach. I do ceremony. all the things you do, and each of those can be done by rote. They can be done purely didactically. They can be done just in the passing of information, or they can be done with creativity and with authenticity and with an expression of who you are as an individual and who I am as an individual, and meeting heart to heart with the person or people across from us, rather than just this. You ask somebody to point to themselves, hardly anybody does this. Everybody does this. And the reason for it is this is where our center is. This is where our aliveness is. And this is the source of the creativity. This is a tool for creativity. This can tell us how I'm going to express something, but this is the source of the expression.
And this is the connection between earth and sky, the above, the below, the thinking, the feeling right here. And as you said, not everybody has to pick up a paintbrush or a hunk of clay. Movement, dance, singing, humming, whistling, gardening, cooking. If you enjoy bringing color together in your home or how you decorate, That is creative expression. And when I don't do something for my creative expression, I get incredibly anxious.
Yeah.
I know something's missing. And even if I take just a couple minutes, could be just that brief, couple of minutes to go through some kind of creative process. Doesn't have to be a product, but a process. What a
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And as you talk about the different kinds of creativity, I mean, look in business, the phenomenal creativity of inventions and new technologies and new ways to communicate. And it's creativity is absolutely limitless. It's the most abundant thing. Uh, even the universe is creating constantly, because even letting go of things and Kali is a wonderful teacher of in order to create, one must destroy first. And in order to release, one must first have created something to release. And so it's a cycle. And it's the inhale and the exhale. And the inhale is the inspiration, and the exhale is the expression. So it's about being alive.
And what we know about the chakras, it's a
Yep.
second chakra awakening from the first chakra of being just surviving. And
Yeah.
then from there, it becomes the feeling for it and the appreciation for it and the joy and the expression and the insight. So what would you say to people that go, I don't have any gifts or talents, or I haven't yet found mine? What do I do?
So
Was that whiny enough?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I've heard that many times. And to be honest with you, I've even said that. um, Probably just as whiny when I'm with people whose creativity I just really, really admire. And so I tell myself the story that I don't measure up in some way. And that's exactly what it is. It's a story. And because we are innately creative, to tell ourselves the story that we are not is creativity. We are making something up that is not true.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I,
Okay. So, so we have brilliant techniques for doing that. You just used the technique of whininess. Um, I might use the technique of comparison to somebody who, um, I've compared myself to creative people. I don't even want to create what they're creating, but because they do it so well, I say, well, I'm not good enough to do that. If I were good enough to do it, I wouldn't do it. so, but it's a story that I'm making up because I'm afraid. This is the golden shadow. I'm afraid to express myself authentically. And if I'm willing to take a look at the source of that shadow piece, the story starts to change, and I can use the very same energy or the very same inner power of why I'm not creative to actually express something, create something that that feeds my soul or serves other people.
yeah. And it's believed that a lot of our latent gifts and talents are right there in the unconscious or the subconscious mind, and
Yeah.
that there are some neurons in the brain that are not being used and that we can awaken them. Now, we are lucky, you and I have pretty big toolboxes of, working with hypnosis and journeying and, creative imagination and visualization. We have a lot of tools that we use for ourselves and to inspire others. Just the simple act of, I hate the word doodling because it minimizes how important it is, but to take our conscious awareness off of the judgment that we say, I can't draw because I don't know how to, and it's going to be an ugly mess, so I'm not even going to bother. I can't sing because my voice isn't pleasing, so I won't even bother. If we get into the deep the deep subconscious or unconscious, we can let our natural gifts up and we can refire those or awaken, I'll call it awaken those neurons and
Yeah,
get them moving because they're holding all this creative energy.
yeah, yeah,
We're just
yeah,
waiting to say, come on out and play.
yeah, yeah. What do you, somebody said one time, what do you need? A written invitation? Well, if you do, then write your own invitation. I mean, you can do it with wonderful letters and so on, or on a beautiful piece of paper, and you've just created your own invitation to express your creativity. In a workshop that I do, Angels in the Dark, which is a result of the art that I did to help my own healing from cancer. You know, I told the disease it could express itself however it wanted to, and I would be at its hands. And as I was painting, it wasn't the disease that expressed itself; it was the energies that were healing me, and so that's why I called them angels. And so it's the angels in the dark. I was expressing this the energy that was trying to help me release the cancer. And so in that workshop, that's what we do. We start off by painting the problem, whatever people showed up with. You know, I hate my mother, or I don't know how to paint, or I just got fired, or whatever it might be. Paint that with words. I mean, literally, write it with paint, and then we paint over that with what that feels like. And so all of a sudden, the canvas gets very messy and ugly and gritchy and stuff. And then, it's a whole process. And ultimately, a figure will start to emerge. And then, that's the birth of the angel. And then we start to paint what's the feeling of that. And we paint that as the wings and the feathers. And so it evolves. And what we discover in that, Joyce, and you do this, I've witnessed you do this beautifully, not with paint, but with your ceremony and with your words and just how you express your authenticity. But what people discover is that if I start with where I am and own that, really make that rather than try and push it away, really own that's where I begin, and then start to allow that to unfold with some guidance sometimes, but allow it to unfold in the direction that it wants to go, because all of nature, including us, ultimately wants healing, expansion, growth, integration.
And we're all capable of it.
Yes. So it will take us, if we're willing to follow, and it's going to be uncomfortable sometimes. That's why we fear it. It's going to show us what we purposely buried in the shadow. But it shows us that so that we can, instead of doing this, instead of holding it in our own darkness, we can start to do this. And now we still have it, but we can see it, we can work with it, we can recognize how it's trying to serve us and serve others through us. So, and in the process of that, many of the things that you mentioned, the movement, the sound, we incorporate all of that because that's what grounds it.
I'm sorry.
No.
You documented one of your paintings that went through tons of phases. Every phase you recorded. Is that on your website? Because I'll be sharing all your contact information for people to reach out to you. Is there a way that they can see that? Because it's extraordinary.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Actually, I paint that way a lot now. And that's the process I just described. That particular painting does not exist now because ultimately what I did was I painted over it the shapes of feathers over the whole painting, and then cut out the feathers and tied them to these arched sticks and turned them into wings, and photographed different people standing in front of the wings that had all of this dark shadow and all of this light shadow and all of this creative expression. And then I took the wings apart, and I still have the sticks, and the feathers are separate. And sometimes I use them in ceremony. So
You record, by record, I mean, did you show or document? Not that we do it for the documentation, but that's what I found so intriguing, that one painting that you did, it was captured by a photo
yeah,
before
yeah,
you went on, and
yeah.
to see that
I
it,
have the photos. I have the photos even of uh, the feathers over the whole painting and the cutting out of the feathers. And then I made like a wreath just by laying them down on the floor of the feathers, and then the wings. So everything, there's a few things that I've wanted to document all the way along. And another one that I did was a personal transformation piece. And at the end of it, I did a fire ceremony and burned it. And I documented that as well. I didn't document the ceremony itself, just the aftermath. And if I can do this, I'm going to be what do you call it? Leading a wedding ceremony this coming weekend. It'll be past by the time people see it, but I'm creating a altar cloth for the couple to stand on, and I did it exactly the same way. Okay, their thing is butterflies, and they each have their own butterflies. So I'm doing it exactly the same way. I painted the words of how they discovered each other and the pain that brought them together, and then the things that they want to bring to the marriage, and what's important to them in marriage, and then started to form the butterflies, and it's unfolding.
that's beautiful. Another thing, we both officiate weddings. We've got
Yeah.
so many overlaps. Although I have to say, you said that I was also an author. I'm not yet. Have not done writing yet, well, other than articles. But here's what strikes me about what you're talking about with layering pictures and cutting them up and burning them. It is so hard for humans to let go of things, because then we feel like it invalidates a part of us. The time, those silly air quotes, the time we put into it, it celebrates, it doesn't invalidate, but it is so hard for us to let go of things. But as artists, it's even hard for us to let go of our work sometimes. How many times do you go into a gallery show and you see NFS, not for sale, because the artist has a special connection? I'm not saying that's always a bad thing, but we do, and I'll say for me, for an artist, it's really hard to think about destroying my work. And not that it's also great, but I measure the emotions I put into it, the time, the materials. And now I hear how, in hearing your description, I hear how non-productive that is, or non-expressive that is. And it brought me right back to the reason I was creating, for the expression, the process, not the product. So
Right.
that's really meaningful. So thank you for that.
Well, I mean, what you're saying is so true, not just for artists, but all of us who are creative. They become in some ways our kids. We gave birth to this, and how do we destroy it? But that's the thing. There are some that get created that are meant to have a life beyond me. There are others that it's not about destroying, it's about transforming. And so how can it properly be transformed if I'm holding on to it like this. I have to release it.
And to
so in the
create
case,
room for more expression.
exactly. And that's what, as a shaman, that it's what we release, what we allow to die, is as much a part of the creative creation of life and the creation of the expression of the life cycle as what we give birth to. And that doesn't mean that we kill off everything we create. And it doesn't mean that we always create with the intention of it dying. But there are some things that are called into that cycle in a different way. And if we hold on to it, then we're stifling life, where it becomes like a stagnant pond. And when it's called to a different kind of expression, then who am I to hold it into a place of stagnation or, choke it to death?
Right. And I was just going to say, because believe it or not, our time has come to an end. Who are we to determine what the life or energy cycle of anything is?
Yeah.
So with that, I'll thank you again, my dear friend. Love you deeply, and so grateful and honored to have you come and share time together here. And for our viewers, thanks for joining us on the Sacred Journey. Know that George and I have a few things up our sleeve, and maybe a very, very exciting adventure, a retreat adventure. So thanks again, George. We'll see you again soon.
The water's warm at Jaws Pond, and we're stocked full of treasures. Big or small, we buy it all. We buy and sell fast rides, power tools, vintage guitars, and so much more. Walk the plank in style with our fine jewelry, diamonds, and watches. Plus, we have a huge selection of the latest video games, including the new PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. Jaws Pond, conveniently located on Meriden Waterbury Turnpike in Southington and West Main Street in New Britain.